So we're going to look at, why financial independence and what are the barriers. We're going to talk a little bit about share, save, spend, which is the priority of how you use your money and assets. Then we'll talk about saving versus borrowing, spending issues and solutions, investing, the good and the bad investments, and then preserving assets during retirement. So what you're going to hear today is a culmination of what I've learned up till today. And if I had known what I know today when I was age 18, I could have retired at age 50. So it's, in hindsight, our knowledge curves are in reverse of what we need in order to accomplish long-term goals. But that being said, it's important to understand where I'm coming from and understand that I may be off the spectrum on certain perspectives. On the other hand, I need to say that, does that mean that all my decisions comply exactly with what I'm going to talk about? No. And every day I ignore my accumulated knowledge, and usually to my own detriment. So whenever I'm thinking about a decision and the red bells go off, and I don't listen to them, I usually tend to regret it. So I've begun to trust myself. My other perspective is I tell people occasionally, I really don't trust anybody, friends, relatives, but I'll gather information from everybody. And if it complies with or fits into my accumulated knowledge, I add it and broaden my knowledge. If it doesn't, then I'll reject it and go from there. What's not on here is that my father died when I was 12. And so I was the oldest son of a farm family, and my mother, obviously with a sudden death, went through a period of mourning that lasted 2 or 3 years. And she was a warrior anyway. So we found out early in life that you didn't tell mother things that she didn't need to know about. In other words, so you could say from age 12, I've been pretty much on my own. I mean, the good news is I've had the freedom to make all my own decisions. I was driving the car back and forth to town, hauling seed and stuff like that from the time I was 12, even well before it was legal to be on the roads and stuff like that. So over those years, I've accumulated some skills, and like I said, some of those I listen to, sometimes I haven't. I've also gotten knowledge through doing real estate, working with estate planning, certified financial planner, did tax preparation, and then I spent some years at the university doing gift planning and then also as a vice chancellor. So I was able over that time period to accumulate a wide variety of skills and knowledge. Financial independence is really a journey, and some people could argue it may actually be more of a journey up here than it is in reality. In other words, how we feel has a lot to do with whether we are, in our mind, financially independent, or are we destitute or in need of resources. So for some people, it's as simple as having enough food to eat and a shelter and some money in the bank. And if they have those things, they feel very comfortable and their family feels very well off. Retirement is at a point where if you have enough assets, you can do whatever you want to do. And for some people that may continue to be working, but some people travel or doing volunteer work is going to be a priority. And it's different for everyone. So there is no cookie cutter solution to what your financial independence is going to be. So for example, if we look at an immigrant that just arrived in this country from a war-torn country, financial independence can be as simple as food to eat and a place to stay. If they got some money in the bank, that's even a bonus. And then we've got other people who would not feel comfortable unless they had at least $50,000 in cash as an emergency fund. You know, that they just don't feel that they're comfortable in the business unless they have that. And then you have people at the other end of the spectrum who are on the verge of bankruptcy all the time, but are really feel as if they're at the top of the world. You know, they just no bankruptcy, it wipes the slate clean, I get to start over again, and I found one way it doesn't work, let me try another way, and see if I can, you know. If you look at some of the people that are really, really successful, sometimes they've been through bankruptcy 2 or 3 times, and they've tried things that didn't work out, but ultimately find one that does. So, for us, for many people, it's where they're at emotionally as well as financially. So, during this session, we're going to try to help you become comfortable with how you can be financially independent while you're working and or accumulating assets for a period in time when you can be, quote, retired. We'll look at the barriers that are out there, help us to prioritize how we use our assets and income, and then we'll go through the financial tools that are out there to help us, and then those that I don't think do us as much good, and in my mind, avoid. Well, for a long time, they've been trying to understand, you know, is financial independence important? There's been the studies and looking at children in communities and their success rate and their achievements in school. And Edina has always been held up as one of the places where most of the people are pretty financially well off, and their children are always doing above average in education, testing, and stuff like that. And then when compared especially to children from smaller community, families and how they were doing. Sometimes the exception to that is immigrant families who we would define as poor, but in their minds, they're rich, you know, because they've got a house, they've got food, and they've got money in the bank, and life has never been better, even though if we measured their assets and their incomes and stuff against the standard, we would come to a different conclusion of whether they were well off or not. So, a study was done recently of farmers in India, and what they did is they tested these farmers twice. They tested them first just before the harvest. So this is at the point where the crops look the best, they're just fantastic, the opportunities look like they're unlimited, but in the farmers' minds, they understand that that can change in an instant. There can be a rain, can be a hail, can be a cyclone, could be insects, could be birds, I mean, the floods, you name it. There's 100 different ways that that crop could disappear overnight. And instead of being poor with a crop to show as a potential, they could be poor with nothing to show for it. And then they measured them after they had collected the harvest. They'd either sold the product or they put it in storage and there was available for them to spend. And they tested much, much different and much higher scores on this IQ problem-solving type test that they put together. So it was clear that whereas in reality, you could say we're very little real difference. I mean, what was a potential became a reality. In their minds, was a huge difference. And that difference greatly impacted their ability to make decisions, make good decisions, solve problems. And so they started to extrapolate that and have determined that probably it has the same impact upon families who, children growing up in families where money is always an issue, money is always a problem, and in some cases even to the point where there may not be food on the table, there may not be a house to live in, there could be homeless and stuff like that. so that children from that type of environment do less, not because they have less intelligence. And the people with more money don't necessarily do more because they can buy computers and stuff, and maybe that helps, but that isn't the whole solution. The solution is that, or the key is that those families, those children feel is not an issue. I mean, financial independence is something you don't worry about. In other words, you've got enough food to eat, you've got a shelter, you've got enough money to do what you want to do. So, trying to help us understand that how we deal with our money within families is very critical, because children are very, very observant and or perceptive. You know, they will pick up the waves, and if the waves from the parents are constantly one of stress, that's going to impact them in how they provide in school. Same way with adults, though. Adults who are comfortable that they have enough to eat, they have a shelter, they've got a little money in the bank, and money is not a concern, tend to make better decisions as to their resources, but even better decisions lifestyle. You know, why do people smoke? You know, a lot of times maybe there is some enjoyment into it, but I think a lot of times it's something to deal with what else is not well in their situation, and money tends to be a part of it. And yet, if we have a pack-a-day smoker today, you know, we're looking at, what, $30,000 a year for cigarettes? I mean, that's got to have a huge impact on your financial planning, you know, if you're shelling that out every day just to smoke. So it's $8 a day times 365. You can do the math for me. If you're doubting my math, it's very, very high. Is it 30 or is it 3?
3,000. It's
3,000.
3,000.
But
Wow,
still,
okay. See, I make mistakes all the time. I'm just testing you to see if you are paying attention. But even 3,000 is a significant number.
yeah.
So. Okay, well, does money buy happiness? Well, the two are not an equation. You know, the recent study that I've read, they interviewed people with net assets of over 20 million in each family. And over 95% were not happy. I think if I handed 20 million to every one of you here, your happiness factor might go up a little bit. I mean, I think you would find
Is that part of the
way.
class?
So, you know, and I think it's related to dissatisfaction with something. And that's because if you worship money, and I always claim my father said this, I don't know whether he did or not, or maybe I just read it someplace, but money is nothing. It's only what you can do with money that makes the difference, you know. And so if you use your money to help others, if you use your money to provide things for yourself, or you use your money to do retirement stuff, those are completely, may in some cases be completely different uses of the same resources, and yet the result to each of us is different depending on how we feel about money. And just making money to earn money, you know, as somebody once said, you can't take it with you, so just piling up a bunch of it doesn't necessarily accomplish anything in this lifetime. It's only what you're able to then use it for at some point. The other factor is that I think most of us totally underestimate our abilities to handle relatively complex things. This computer up here, you know, it is absolutely fantastic. You know, and if you study how we learn things, And if you look at professional athletes or athletes that perform at the highest level, they go through a process where in the beginning they learn. In other words, basketball, because that's the one I love and most participate in. You shoot baskets and you shoot them all the same way until you can do it 10 times in a row. Once you've got that ingrained, then when you get in the game and you're out there and you're not standing shooting with nobody guarding you, your computer up here does the calculations to what you need to do to adjust your shot so that it'll go in the basket. But if you haven't practiced and taught that brain how to do it exactly right all the time, you don't have that ability. Until I learned that, and bowling was a good example for me. And if you watch bowling, it's always fun, is that, you know, the ideal strike is it goes right into the pocket, and all the pins went up. And then you'll see somebody who throws the ball and it misses the pocket completely and all the pins fall out. Well, what has happened is that somewhere during that delivery, the mind has calculated that the direction we're heading now isn't going to get us into the pocket. So here's the calculation that will get the end result. And so what you throw and how you throw it and how fast you throw it tends to compensate for the fact that you really didn't do a very good job of approaching the alley. And then your best bowlers, you'll see, you know, they'll get 90% of their shots right in, but they may get 100% of the strikes because their brain is compensating for that. In the same way in sports, you know, the best players will play a whole game without thinking. In other words, it's all automatic. It's all up here. You know, they know when to dribble, they know when to shoot, they know when to pass, they know when to play defense, they know how to rebound. It's all automatic. You don't have to think about it. And we can do the same thing with our financial stuff. You know, keep putting a little more information in all the time. Some of it's going to come in, you'll discard, hey, that's ridiculous. Makes no sense whatsoever. And then there'll be other stuff they'll take in and you'll say, hey, that makes sense. And you'll add it to that accumulated knowledge. And so the result is you'll be able to make better decisions.